On the afternoon of May 26, 1969, in a quiet home in Van Nuys, Jeffrey Hunter suddenly collapsed on a staircase. There was no gunshot, no car crash, no paparazzi lights, only silence. Just hours after an emergency brain surgery, he passed away the following morning at the age of 42. A star who had stood alongside John Wayne, who had borne the face of Jesus Christ on screen, and who had been the first Captain Pike of Star Trek, gone so quietly that many scarcely realized Hollywood had just lost someone of consequence. That death was not a single, isolated moment. It was the end point of a chain of unspoken events. A film set accident in Europe that was brushed aside, repeated concussions that went inadequately diagnosed, and a body that had endured too much in silence for too long. Ironically, Hunter did not fall at the height of fame. He collapsed while his career hovered in between, no longer at its peak, yet far from extinguished. Jeffrey Hunter's life was a series of unforgiving contradictions. He possessed the perfect face of classic Hollywood, yet was perpetually out of step with his era. He was a rigorously trained, disciplined, serious actor, working within an industry increasingly drawn to noise and disruption. He carried the most sacred image ever put on screen, while privately concealing inner conflicts his time would not allow to be named. Jeffrey Hunter did not disappear for lack of talent. He vanished because Hollywood changed course, and he either could not or would not run to keep up. That sudden death forced people to rewind time, not to search for a single fateful moment, but to understand how a person had been formed long before entering Hollywood's vortex. Before he became a familiar face on the big screen, before the name Jeffrey Hunter, he was Henry Herman McKinney's Jr., a boy who grew up in an America still marked by the scars of the Great Depression and war. Jeffrey Hunter was born on November 25, 1926, in New Orleans, into a middle-class family with no connection whatsoever to the film industry. When he was just 4 years old, the family moved to Milwaukee, a change that seemed minor at the time, yet quietly laid the foundation for everything that followed. In Wisconsin, Hunter did not grow up amid spotlights or stages, but within a world of disciplined sports and the austere rhythm of the American Midwest. He played football, learned to endure physical impact, and early on absorbed the experience of being judged by performance rather than emotion. Alongside sports, Hunter discovered a different, quieter outlet: radio and local theater. While attending Whitefish Bay High School, he took part in radio programs for WTMJ and performed with the Children's Theater of the Air. There was no glamour, no ambition of stardom, only a teenager learning how to control his voice, his breathing, and his presence before others. Summers spent with touring summer stock companies, one small role after another, gradually forged in him a restrained kind of confidence. The ability to stand before an audience without needing to make noise to be noticed. From that foundation, a youth shaped by seriousness, work, and little romantic illusion, Hunter entered adulthood with the sense that acting was not an escape, but a profession that carried responsibility. And from this point, the first quiet conflict began to form. Between a man taught to be disciplined and guarded, and an entertainment world that increasingly demanded exposure beyond what a person could reasonably bear. From those early radio broadcasts and teenage performances, Jeffrey Hunter's path did not immediately turn toward bright lights. Instead, it sank deeper into a long process of training, where talent was acknowledged only if it proved durable. While still very young, he worked regularly for WTMJ Radio and the Children's Theater of the Air, environments that demanded absolute precision in voice, timing, and storytelling through sound alone. There was no room for excess gesture, no opportunity for correction. Each broadcast meant total responsibility before an invisible audience. Beginning in the summer of 1942, Hunter joined the Northport Players, followed by the Eagles' mere summer stock. Small roles, punishing rehearsal schedules, makeshift stages, and constantly changing audiences forced him to adapt quickly, memorize scripts under scarce conditions, and remain steady under pressure without expecting applause. Acting, for Hunter, gradually became a form of labor rather than a romantic dream. In 1945, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Trained as a radar technician, Hunter worked within a rigidly disciplined environment where mistakes were not tolerated. A foot injury dating back to high school kept him from combat deployment, but the period of service still left a deep imprint. Obedience to structure, intense concentration, and the conviction that one must control oneself before attempting to control circumstances. After the war, Hunter returned to academic life at Northwestern University. He earned a bachelor's degree in speech and radio in 1949, joined Phi Delta Theta, and immersed himself in stage drama, radio workshops, and the NBC Radio Institute in Chicago. Each environment added another layer of skill, from live theater to enclosed studios, from physical performance to voice acting. A small role in Julius Caesar, directed by David Bradley, marked his first contact with cinema. Quiet, understated, but enough to confirm that his years of training had not been in vain. Graduate study at UCLA brought Hunter to Hollywood at precisely the moment when studios were seeking young faces with rigorous preparation. When he performed All My Sons on the university stage, talent scouts from both Paramount and 20th Century Fox took notice. Not because of a sudden flash of brilliance, but because of a composure forged through radio, theater, and military discipline, solid enough to stand before a camera without having to start from the beginning. From the moment the scouts left the auditorium after All My Sons, Hollywood's gears began turning faster for Jeffrey Hunter. On June 1st, 1950, Darryl F. Zanuck, the powerful head of 20th Century Fox, decided to sign him to a long-term contract and give him a new name. Henry Herman McKinney's Jr. officially vanished from studio paperwork. Jeffrey Hunter was born as a carefully shaped product, precisely matched to the post-war classical leading man model Fox was seeking, tall, composed, with bright eyes that were steady rather than aggressive. In 1951, his first screen appearance in 14 Hours was not a star-making explosion. Hunter appeared only briefly amid the tense Manhattan setting of a man threatening suicide on a building ledge. Yet, it was that restraint that caught Zanuck's attention. Hunter did not push emotion. He held it at a measured level, as if more accustomed to standing before a radio microphone than performing for the camera. The film achieved solid commercial success and placed Hunter among the young faces Fox began to watch closely. Just months later, Call Me Mister put him again into small frames, testing reflexes more than depth. There was no room for complex psychology, no chance for a breakthrough, but Hunter understood the rules clearly. At Fox, one climbed the ladder through patience. The pressure did not come from the press, but from the fact that every minor role was another weighing of whether he was worth investing in. Everything shifted pace with the Frogmen. In an all-male war film, Hunter was finally placed in a harsh environment where physical endurance, discipline, and focus became natural extensions of performance. Long shooting days, water sequences, and heavy equipment left no space to look good for the camera. Fox saw in Hunter a different kind of leading man. Not fiery like James Dean, not glamorous like Robert Wagner, but someone who could stand firmly within serious stories, war, history, genres the studio still regarded as pillars of long-term revenue. From the Frogmen, Fox began pushing Jeffrey Hunter one step further. No longer an experimental face, but an asset that needed careful placement. In 1952, Take Care of My Little Girl offered a different image. Youthful, romantic, caught amid the moral conflicts of American college life. The role required him to temper his innate seriousness, adopting a more approachable charm for younger audiences, yet without allowing any looseness. Fox was testing whether Hunter could become the ideal boyfriend on screen, safe, non-rebellious, but attractive enough to hold viewers' attention. That same year, Red Skies of Montana pulled Hunter back into harsher territory, men working against a brutal natural landscape where courage required few words. The role allowed Fox to place him alongside seasoned actors without letting him be swallowed by them. Hunter did not dominate the frame, but he did not disappear either, a quality producers considered exceptionally safe in box office terms. The films earned steady profits, not explosive hits, but enough to confirm that Hunter was a reliable choice. With bells on their toes, Fox nearly completed the image it sought to build. Hunter appeared as the archetypal young American man, tall, upright, attentive, non-disruptive. Within the studio, he was increasingly positioned as a counterbalance to Robert Wagner. Wagner sharp and energetic, Hunter calm and enduring. Two parallel paths. Two types of leading men for the same generation of audiences. That image extended beyond the studio. Marilyn Monroe, then a rising Fox star, publicly expressed admiration for Hunter in press conversations. A man with striking looks who was not obsessed with fame, serious about his craft, and distant from Hollywood's familiar theatrics. Such recognition helped frame Hunter as the young American man America wanted to see on screen in the post-war years. But from this point on, an invisible limit began to close in. Once the image was sealed as too perfect, decent, safe, uncontroversial, each subsequent role forced Hunter to struggle to be different without alarming Fox. The pressure lay not in failure, but in the prohibition against deviation. While inwardly, Hunter grew increasingly aware that absolute propriety could become the most subtle cage of all for an actor still hungry for challenge. Just as the sense of being boxed in began to tighten, Jeffrey Hunter was abruptly pushed into a completely different space, one where propriety was no longer enough, and inner conflict was examined to its core. In 1956, John Ford cast Hunter in The Searchers, placing him opposite John Wayne in a story far darker than any familiar Western of its time. The role of Martin Pauly was not the central hero, but it became the film's quiet moral axis, the witness, the skeptic, the one forced to live with choices others refused to confront. In Ford's world, Hunter was not allowed to look good. He had to preserve a youthful openness against Wayne's hard-edged severity. Letting his eyes carry moral tensions the dialogue never spelled out. That restraint made Martin Pauly an emotional anchor for the audience, and it became the performance critics would later regard as the artistic peak of Hunter's career. The Searchers achieved enduring critical prestige, steady long-term box office success, and was eventually canonized as a classic, a stature no Fox film Hunter had made before ever reached. Ford continued to call Hunter back in The Last Hurrah, where he appeared amid a heavyweight ensemble, and then entrusted him with the lead in Sergeant Rutledge, a thorny, contentious work confronting race and justice in America. Here, Hunter was no longer the emblem of clean-cut decency. He bore the weight of questions society preferred not to ask. Though the film failed to meet box office expectations, critics recognized in Hunter an actor willing to step outside his comfort zone, even when that choice offered audiences no easy reassurance. Alongside his work with Ford, Hunter appeared in Disney's The Great Locomotive Chase, then Gun for a Coward and The Proud Ones, roles that reinforced his reputation as a steady, capable actor across genres. Yet the paradox grew clearer. Despite respect and a steady stream of serious projects, Hunter never erupted into a mass cultural icon like Wayne, nor did he become a rebellious emblem for youth like James Dean. He occupied a difficult middle ground, too nuanced for pure stardom, too restrained to ignite a generation, and that in-between space increasingly became one he had to navigate alone, without the safety net of the proper image that had once shielded him. Amid what seemed an otherwise stable trajectory, a setback arrived without warning. Jeffrey Hunter suddenly fell seriously ill with hepatitis, just as he was being scheduled for upcoming projects at Universal. The illness drained not only his strength, but also his on-screen presence in the most ruthless way the studio system allowed. Roles were withdrawn, his name quietly erased from production plans, and the industry moved on without pause. There was no scandal, no public dispute, only a prolonged absence of nearly 14 months, during which Hunter was effectively pushed out of Hollywood's rhythm while other faces swiftly filled the gap. That absence cost more than time. It cost position. When Hunter returned, the landscape had shifted. Studio contracts were looser, patience shorter, and an actor once deemed reliable now had to prove all over again that he could still carry a leading role. The pressure came not from criticism, but from silence. The silence that signaled Hollywood had learned to continue without him. It was in this context that John Ford appeared one last time as a familiar anchor. Hunter made a brief cameo in The Last Hurrah, 1958, a fleeting presence amid a crowded cast, a sign that Ford still remembered him, though no longer placing major bets. 2 years later, Ford offered Hunter one final opportunity: the lead in Sergeant Rutledge, a bold film about justice and racial discrimination that ran counter to the box office appetites of the moment. Hunter entered the role not with the security he once had, but with the urgency of proving his worth anew. Critics recognized the film as a serious, principled effort, yet its commercial failure brought all calculations to an abrupt halt. There was no formal farewell, no public rift. But after Sergeant Rutledge, the shared path between Ford and Hunter quietly closed, leaving Hunter standing alone in a Hollywood changing its tempo, where even the most enduring artistic alliances of his life could no longer shield him from the growing risks ahead. The quiet after Sergeant Rutledge had barely settled when Jeffrey Hunter unexpectedly entered another kind of peak, not through artistic prestige, but through commercial weight. In 1960, Hell to Eternity returned him to center stage in the way Hollywood understood best: the box office. Playing Guy Gabaldon, a real-life U.S. Marine who persuaded hundreds of Japanese soldiers to surrender, Hunter did not need to display layered psychology or iconic symbolism. He presented a young soldier who was resilient and brave in an ordinary human way, and audiences responded with better-than-expected receipts. The film became one of the biggest commercial successes of his career, strong enough to place Hunter back on the list of bankable stars. That Gabaldon later named his son Jeffrey. Hunter Gabaldon was not a publicity detail, but a sign that the performance resonated with those who had lived the reality of war, not just its screen version. That momentum carried Hunter to the most consequential crossroads of his life. In 1961, Nicholas Ray cast him in King of Kings, a large-scale religious epic with a substantial budget and global ambition. The role of Jesus Christ allowed no margin for error. Every gesture would be scrutinized. Every look carried theological meaning. Hunter approached the role with near-absolute discipline, restrained emotion, composed stillness, and an acceptance that silence would bear much of the character's weight. The film succeeded at the box office, received wide distribution, and quickly became a familiar seasonal choice during religious holidays, carrying Hunter's face farther than any role before it. Yet that glory came with a quiet cost. as the image of Jesus Christ became inseparable from Hunter. Public admiration gradually turned into a hard-to-name suspicion. He was seen as too handsome, too young, and increasingly as a symbol rather than an actor capable of transformation. Producers hesitated. Would audiences accept Jesus as an ordinary man, or in the morally thorny stories of a Hollywood changing its tempo? No longer boxed in for being too safe, Hunter fell into a new paradox. Too solemn for a cinema moving toward experimentation, rebellion, and moral ambiguity. After King of Kings, Hunter understood clearly that unless he redirected himself, that sacred image would consume the rest of his screen life. He chose to move against the reverence that had made his name, plunging into roles with a more everyday, sometimes abrasive, edge. In 1961, Man Trap placed him in a shadowy world of crime and suspicion, where the character no longer stood on moral high ground, but moved through consequence and compromise. The film did not ignite the box office, but it showed Hunter's willingness to break expectations, a risky choice, while audiences still viewed him through a sanctified lens. Next, No Man is an Island returned Hunter to war, this time in the true story of George Ray Tweed, an American who survived for years within Japanese-held territory during World War II. The role demanded physical and psychological endurance, placing Hunter in prolonged isolation, the complete opposite of the communal religious image of King of Kings. The film performed solidly, enough to prove that Hunter could still lead audiences when the story allowed him to be human rather than symbolic. In 1962, The Longest Day inserted Hunter into one of the most crowded casts Hollywood had ever assembled. Amid the brutal Normandy sequences, he was no longer the center. Yet his brief presence represented a class of rigorously trained actors who could stand firm within massive productions without being dissolved by scale. With gold for the Caesars, Hunter left the United States for Italy, seeking new ground to escape the shadow of his earlier image. European cinema gave him more freedom, but also meant drifting away from his familiar audience, a trade-off difficult to reverse. As film opportunities slowed, television opened as a promising escape. In 1963, Hunter signed a 2-year contract with Warner Brothers, taking the lead in the series Temple Houston, the story of a Western lawyer devoted to justice, based on a real figure. Hunter did more than star. He participated in production, gaining a measure of control over his image for the first time. The series ran for 26 episodes, airing steadily, enough to build a stable audience base, but not enough to become a phenomenon. When the show was canceled, the chance to transition fully with television closed abruptly, leaving Hunter caught between two worlds: cinema no longer waiting, and television not yet holding him. The loss of momentum was quiet, but deep enough to force Hunter to keep searching for footing within an industry changing faster than stars shaped by older standards could adapt. While television still occupied a liminal space for film stars, Jeffrey Hunter entered what seemed a short-term experiment. In 1964, he accepted the role of Captain Christopher Pike in Star Trek's pilot, The Cage, a serious, philosophical science fiction project that ran counter to television's prevailing taste for quick entertainment. Hunter gave Pike calm authority, intelligence, and leadership without bluster. A contemplative commander rather than an action hero. For him, it was a rare role that preserved cinematic dignity on the small screen. But the initial response was unfavorable. NBC rejected the pilot as too slow and too cerebral, then made an unprecedented demand: produce a second pilot. For Hunter, that meant returning to square one in a medium he still regarded as temporary. He believed cinema, despite its difficulties, remained the place where an actor was judged by depth and longevity. Television at that time offered little promise of a long future for a mature leading man. Hunter declined to continue. choosing to leave while the project remained uncertain, holding fast to the belief that the big screen was his proper destination. Viewed in its historical context, the decision was entirely rational. Television had little artistic prestige, series rarely lasted more than a few seasons, and a TV career was often seen as a step backward. Yet time reversed every measure. Star Trek was restructured and exploded into a cultural phenomenon, while Pike, though briefly seen, became foundational to the franchise's lore. The image of the first captain, measured and humane, still bears Hunter's imprint, even though he did not continue the journey. From the distance of history, that choice acquires a particular bitterness. A door closed not because of error, but because it was consistent with the logic of its time. And that very correctness, illuminated by the future, became the fateful moment that left Hunter forever standing outside a legacy he helped bring into being. The closing of the Star Trek door did not trigger an immediate fall, but it exposed something Jeffrey Hunter had carried from very early on, a persistent search for stability in his private life as an anchor against professional uncertainty. It was within the Hollywood of the early 1950s, when Fox was shaping him into a proper leading man, that Hunter met Barbara Rush, a young actress who was intelligent, independent, and likewise at a promising beginning. They met while both were working within the studio system, where auditions, packed shooting schedules, and promotional events brought people closer through the constant feeling of being watched. For Hunter, Barbara was more than a beautiful Hollywood face. She spoke plainly, had strong opinions, and did not project the dependency often expected of studio romances. Their attraction formed quickly but quietly, the kind of bond between two young people trying to maintain balance between professional ambition and the need to remain themselves. They married in late 1950, precisely as Hunter had signed his Fox contract and his image was being aggressively advanced. On paper and in the public eye, they were an ideal couple. Two young actors, photogenic, with wide-open futures. Early married life gave Hunter a sense of order he deeply valued. A home separate from the dizzying pace of studio production. In 1952, their son Christopher was born, forcing Hunter to divide his energy between film sets and fatherhood while his career remained under close supervision. Pressure accumulated quietly. Long shooting schedules kept Hunter frequently away, while Barbara did not remain stationary in the role of a star's wife. Both had careers of their own, which meant less shared time and increasingly divergent rhythms of life. Hunter was accustomed to discipline, to controlling image and emotion. Barbara needed space to develop on her own terms. Tension did not erupt into scandal, but seeped into prolonged silences and decisions no longer discussed as carefully as before. By 1955, the marriage ended after 5 years. There were no public accusations, only the exhaustion of two people who had tried to maintain a family structure while being pulled along different trajectories. Barbara continued her acting career while Hunter emerged with a new paradox. Outwardly, he remained the model American man. Inwardly, he felt for the first time that what offered the greatest sense of safety could also be the hardest to hold on to when the stage lights never dim. After the quiet dissolution of his first marriage, Jeffrey Hunter did not plunge into fleeting relationships typical of Hollywood lore. He entered a period of seeking a more orderly family life, one less abrasive against professional ambition. It was during this time that he met Dusty Bartlett, a fashion model with a calm, seasoned presence, a woman with a child of her own who was not swept up in the entertainment world's display-driven pace. Their connection did not grow out of glamour. Dusty was not under studio lights, not competing for roles, not obsessed with poster placement. That difference created a sense of security Hunter had lost after his first marriage. The relationship developed more slowly and pragmatically, culminating in marriage in 1957, when Hunter's career was recovering but far from fully stable. For him, this was not simply remarriage, but an attempt to rebuild a durable family structure. Hunter did not stand apart from fatherhood. He adopted Steele, Dusty's son from her previous relationship, and later the couple had 2 children together, Todd and Scott. During this period, Hunter's public image leaned more toward private family life than promotional parties. He tried to be present for his children amid shoots, travel, and the uneven cycles of his career. For Dusty, marriage was not a platform for fame, but a private space that needed protection from outside pressures. Yet Hollywood's transformation in the 1960s began to erode that foundation. As Hunter moved past the peak of King of Kings and struggled to find fitting roles, European trips, uncertain projects, and mounting financial and emotional instability widened the distance at home. Dusty was accustomed to stability. Hunter was pulled into a vortex of self-justification within an industry rapidly changing its tastes. Pressure did not explode into noise, but accumulated through prolonged absences, weary returns, and the sense that they were living under the same roof while enduring very different strains. After nearly 10 years together, the marriage ended in 1967. There was no scandal, no public collapse, only the fatigue of a man who had tried to keep family as his anchor, while he himself was slipping from a familiar professional position. This separation left Hunter with a different emptiness than before. No longer the shock of youth, but the loss of what he had believed to be the most enduring thing in his life. At the very moment, he needed it most. The breakup with Dusty left Jeffrey Hunter weary rather than bitter. By the late 1960s, he was no longer searching for a new beginning in the romantic sense, but for a presence close enough that he would not have to keep carrying everything alone. It was in that context that Hunter met Emily McLaughlin, a familiar face on American television. Best known as Nurse Jessie Brewer on General Hospital, and someone who had spent enough years in the industry to understand both the price of fame and the instability that lay behind it. Their relationship formed without haste and without noise. Emily did not enter Hunter's life with expectations of being rescued or of having her career elevated. She already had her own footing, a steadier rhythm than the erratic years of Hunter's film work. What drew them together was a deeply human sense of recognition. 2 adults, seasoned by experience, each having lived through loss, sober enough not to romanticize feeling. For Hunter, Emily offered understanding without the need for long explanations. For Emily, Hunter was not an icon or a role, but a man trying to keep his balance as everything around him shifted. They married in February 1969, a decision made quietly, almost entirely in private. With no children together and no desire for display, the marriage felt more like a refuge than a new chapter to be proven to the public. Hunter entered the relationship with his health already compromised and his career scattered between international projects and television. Emily stood beside him as a true partner, attentive to daily routines, alert to the smallest changes in his physical and emotional state, quietly filling the spaces left by earlier relationships. That fragile calm made the tragedy to come all the heavier. When Hunter suffered a serious accident while filming Cry Chicago in Europe in late 1968, Emily was the first to witness the troubling signs. The shock on the return flight, the confusion, the unsettling silences that doctors at the time could not fully explain. In their home in Van Nuys, Emily became the only person who could clearly see that Hunter was weakening day by day, even as he tried to maintain his customary composure. While his relationship with Emily brought Jeffrey Hunter a rare moment of peace, professional reality continued to erode his footing with cold indifference. After 1963, American cinema offered fewer and fewer opportunities to faces shaped by the old studio system. No major contract was publicly canceled, no formal announcement made. Invitations simply grew scarce. Projects went to younger actors, better suited to a Hollywood leaning toward experimentation and brutality. Hunter chose not to wait. He left the United States, working in Italy, Spain, and later Hong Kong, joining international productions with smaller budgets that nonetheless allowed him to keep working. Films such as Dimension 5, Custer of the West, and Cry Chicago did not restore Hunter to box office stardom. They existed as scattered fragments of a career drifting away from the center. He continued to work steadily, kept his familiar discipline, avoided loud excesses, no drinking scandals, no tabloid appearances. Hunter's decline unfolded almost invisibly. No one attacked him and no one held on. Hollywood simply moved forward, leaving him behind in silence. It was in this context that tragedy arrived, not from personal choice, but from a technical failure. In November 1968 in Spain, Hunter was filming Cry Chicago, a crime picture with multiple action sequences. During a car-related scene, a window designed to shatter safely exploded in the wrong direction, sending force and glass straight toward him. The impact caused a severe concussion, leaving Hunter disoriented and stunned on set. On the flight back to the United States, his condition deteriorated sharply. Hunter went into shock, barely able to speak, his reactions alarmingly slow. Upon landing, he was taken directly to the hospital. Tests at the time recorded a concussion and a displaced vertebra. No clear brain injury was detected, no emergency flagged by the medical standards of the era. Hunter was sent home with instructions to rest. No one knew that from that moment on, an invisible clock had begun counting down, inside the body of a man accustomed to endurance, and within a medical system not yet prepared to recognize latent brain injuries following on-set accidents. The days after his return from Spain passed in a fragile, hard-to-name state. At home in Van Nuys, Jeffrey Hunter tried to maintain a normal routine even as his body betrayed him with ambiguous signs. On the afternoon of May 26, 1969, in that familiar house, Hunter suddenly fell on the staircase. The fall was not loud, but it was violent enough to trigger a chain of injuries that had been silently accumulating: a brain hemorrhage, a skull fracture, and an emergency brain surgery performed overnight. The waiting was long and anxious. When Hunter collapsed on the stairs, Emily McLaughlin faced not only the possibility of losing a partner she had barely had time to build a life with, but also the feeling that their late-found happiness had never been given a chance to stand before fate pulled it down. What they shared was not long enough to be called a full life together, but it was deep enough to become an enduring wound, because for the first time in many years, Hunter was no longer alone, just as time ceased to be on his side. At 9:30 a.m. on May 27, 1969, Jeffrey Hunter died. He was 42. There were no studio lights, no applause, only the heavy silence of an ending that came too soon for a man who had passed through so many crossroads of his era. The news spread quickly, but without spectacle. Hollywood had learned to move on, and Hunter, a star out of step with new tastes, departed into a void that closed before it could be filled. On May 31, 1969, a funeral was held at St. Mark's Episcopal Church. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered for a modest farewell, where memories of a face that had embodied many opposing ideals quietly intersected. Hunter was laid to rest at Glen Haven Memorial Park. There, his story ended not with an explosion, but with a prolonged quiet, the same quiet that had followed him through his final years. When fame receded and the human being emerged, belatedly, just before the light went out for good. Jeffrey Hunter did not create a brand, did not run a studio, and did not redefine Hollywood. His legacy rests in something quieter yet difficult to deny. He was among the very few actors of the 1950s who could move across multiple frames of American cinema without losing professional seriousness. From a young man shaped by the Fox system, to Martin Pauly in John Ford's The Searchers, to Jesus Christ in King of Kings, Hunter repeatedly appeared at key intersections of film history, even if he rarely stood at the center of a cultural frenzy. The role of Jesus Christ in 1961 brought him the greatest commercial success of his life and became the image most closely associated with Hunter for decades. King of Kings has been rebroadcast regularly during religious holidays, allowing his name to endure long after Hollywood shifted toward new faces. Before that, The Searchers, now regarded as one of the greatest American films of all time, secured Hunter a singular place, standing between John Wayne and modern audiences, not as a symbol, but as an indispensable presence. On television, Captain Christopher Pike in Star Trek appeared only once, yet that role became the foundation for an entire mythology that followed. Though Hunter left the project, Pike was revived decades later, a rare example of how a brief choice can leave an unexpectedly long-lasting echo. Jeffrey Hunter did not fall because of scandal, nor was he discarded due to a decline in talent. He was simply an actor of an earlier era, stepping into a new decade whose rhythm no longer matched his own. When Hollywood changed, he did not change fast enough, and was left behind in silence. Perhaps what lingers most about Jeffrey Hunter is not the roles he played, but the way he quietly vanished from Hollywood while still at the height of his abilities. Do you remember the first time you saw him in The Searchers or King of Kings? Share that memory in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so names like Jeffrey Hunter are not quietly forgotten by history once again.